Most perennial gardens look incredible in June and completely spent by August. The plants bloom, they finished, and now you're staring at a bed full of brown stems and faded foliage, waiting for frost to put it out of its misery. You spent money. You spent time. You did everything right. And somehow the garden still looks like it gave up halfway through the season. That's not a gardening failure. That's a plant selection problem, and it is completely fixable. The 12 plants in this video bloom from late spring all the way to frost. Not a few weeks, not a month. Months, plural. Some of them won't stop until a hard freeze takes them down. And the reason you've probably never grown most of them is not because they're difficult. It's because the big box stores and most garden centers don't stock them. They stock what sells fast in spring. These plants require a little more patience to find, and a lot more patience to appreciate, because their value isn't a single explosion of color. It's the slow, relentless, dependable color that keeps going when everything else around them has already quit. There's one plant on this list I want you to stay for. It's number 4. It's not the most beautiful plant here. It's not the most fragrant or the most architectural, but it is the one I would choose if I could only pick one plant for a border, and I needed it to bloom as long as humanly possible. In mild climates, it blooms for 5 straight months without stopping. I'll tell you everything about it when we get there. Hit subscribe. Let's get into it. 1. Scabiosa butterfly blue. Most gardeners who know Scabiosa know the annual version, a cheerful bedding plant that blooms hard and dies at frost. The perennial form is an entirely different creature in terms of longevity, and butterfly blue is the variety that made perennial Scabiosa worth growing. This plant starts blooming in late May and doesn't stop until hard frost takes it. In a good year, in a mild climate, that's 5 to 6 months of non-stop soft lavender blue pincushion flowers. Each individual flower sits on a thin, wiry stem above the foliage mound and opens like a tiny pillow of petals, delicate, airy, and completely irresistible to butterflies. On a warm summer afternoon, a clump of butterfly blue with 3 or 4 swallowtails working it at once is one of the most rewarding things you can have in a garden. The plant stays compact, about 10 to 12 inches tall and a foot or so wide. That matters because it means it works in nearly any position: front of a border, container edge, rock garden, pathway edge. It doesn't crowd its neighbors. It doesn't flop. It holds its form cleanly through the heat of summer. Care is minimal. Deadhead occasionally, not because it won't rebloom without it, but because removing spent flowers keeps the display looking fresh and encourages the next round of buds. It's drought tolerant once established, which means it will keep blooming even through the dry stretches of late summer when other plants are visibly stressed. It wants full sun and good drainage. In clay soil it can struggle, so if drainage is an issue, amend the planting site or raise the bed slightly. Deer and rabbits leave it alone. Groundhogs typically ignore it as well. If you're gardening in an area where wildlife pressure is high, this is the kind of plant that lets you relax. You're not going to walk out in the morning and find it eaten to the crown. Hardy in zones 3 through 8, which means almost the entire country can grow it. For companion planting, pair butterfly blue with anything that shares its light: airy aesthetic, Russian sage, ornamental grasses, catmint, fine-textured Coreopsis. The soft lavender blue plays beautifully against warm yellows and oranges, so Gaillardia or Coreopsis moonbeam directly behind it creates a combination that photographs like a professional designed it. One thing that surprises most gardeners who grow this plant for the first time is how it looks in September and October. In early fall, when most of the border is winding down, butterfly blue hits a second gear. The cooler temperatures seem to intensify the color and extend the individual bloom period. Plants that were steady and reliable all summer become genuinely spectacular in fall. 2. Agastache. If there is a single category of perennial that serious gardeners are consistently more enthusiastic about than casual gardeners, it's Agastache. Once you grow it, you understand why. Once the hummingbirds find it, you understand even better. Agastache, also called hyssop or hummingbird mint, is a genus of aromatic perennials native to North America and Mexico that bloom from June all the way to frost. depending on the variety. The flower spikes range from soft lavender and purple through pink, coral, orange, and deep red. The flowers are tubular and arranged in dense spikes, which makes them the perfect shape for hummingbirds whose curved bills fit perfectly into the flower tube. Within days of placing an Agastache in your garden, hummingbirds will find it. By the end of the first season, they will have memorized its location. The foliage is aromatic, a mix of mint, anise, and something slightly floral that is pleasant to humans and strongly repellent to deer, rabbits, and groundhogs. This is genuinely deer-resistant in a way that many so-called deer-resistant plants aren't. The aromatic oils in the foliage are the reason. Deer, rabbits, and groundhogs all navigate primarily by smell, and a plant that smells like this one simply does not read as food to them. Deer browse it occasionally in desperation when food is genuinely scarce, but they strongly prefer everything else in your garden. Blue Fortune is the workhorse of the group. It grows 18 to 24 inches tall, produces lavender blue spikes continuously from midsummer to frost, and is reliably hardy to Zone 5 and often Zone 4 with good drainage. The silvery blue foliage is attractive all season, even between bloom cycles. This is the variety to start with if you've never grown Agastache. Paquito Orange is at the other end of the size spectrum, genuinely compact at 10 to 14 inches, and produces vivid coral orange spikes that are among the most intense colors available in a hardy perennial. It's absolutely stunning in a container or at the front of a border. Hardy to Zone 6. For warmer climates, Tutti Frutti delivers a soft pink peach that is more pastel than the orange varieties and looks incredible in late summer evening light. Full sun is mandatory. Well-drained soil is equally important. Agastache will rot in winter if it sits in wet soil. Given those two conditions, it asks for almost nothing else. No deadheading required, though cutting back by about a third in midsummer after the first major bloom flush can encourage a denser second wave. 3. Knautia macedonica. This is the one I want you to look up right now and add to your list. Knautia macedonica is a perennial that garden designers love, and that almost no ordinary gardener has ever heard of. It's been quietly improving European cottage gardens for centuries. It's time more American gardens discovered it. Knautia macedonica, sometimes called crimson Scabiosa or Macedonian scabious, produces deep wine-red pincushion flowers on thin, freely branching stems from late spring all the way to frost. The plant structure is loose and airy. It doesn't form a solid mass the way most perennials do. Instead, the stems branch outward and upward in every direction, creating a transparent, weightless quality that allows it to grow into and through adjacent plants without overwhelming them. It weaves. It floats. It adds color to whatever is around it without fighting for space. The individual flowers are small, about an inch across, but they are produced in extraordinary numbers over an extraordinarily long season. You'll have dozens open at any given time from May through October, and the color is unusual. It's not the bright scarlet of a coneflower or the clean magenta of a phlox. It's a deep, saturated crimson wine that photographs beautifully and holds up in heat without fading. Butterflies find it constantly. The flat pincushion shape of the flower provides a perfect landing platform, and the nectar is abundant. In mid-July, a large established clump of Knautia macedonica covered in butterflies and swallowtails looks like something out of a garden magazine. Deer and rabbits avoid it reliably. Groundhogs largely ignore it as well. The soft stems and airy structure may look delicate, but wildlife tends to leave it alone, possibly because of the slightly bitter taste of the foliage, possibly because more palatable options are always nearby. Whatever the reason, it's one less plant you have to protect. It self-seeds gently. This is important to know. Knautia will drop seeds and you will find seedlings nearby next spring. They transplant easily when small. This is how it fills in a garden naturally, not aggressively, not invasively, but thoughtfully. Over 3 or 4 years, a single original plant becomes a small colony that weaves through the surrounding plants in a way that looks intentional. Hardy in zones 5 through 9. Full sun to light shade. Drought tolerant once established. This is not a plant you'll find at a big box store. Order it from a specialty perennial nursery and order more than one. 4. Persicaria amplixicalis. This is the one I told you to wait for. Persicaria amplixicalis, sometimes called mountain fleece or red bistort, is not a plant that most American gardeners know. It's common in European gardens, particularly in England, where it has been a cottage garden staple for decades. In terms of raw bloom duration, there is nothing in the perennial world that matches it at its scale. In my Zone 6 garden, it starts blooming in early July. It does not stop until hard frost takes it in late October or early November. That is 4 months. In Zone 7 and warmer, gardeners regularly report 5 months of continuous bloom, not flush and fade like some plants that bloom for a week and then need 6 weeks to recover. Continuous, daily, uninterrupted bloom from July to frost. The flower spikes are slender and upright, like narrow red pokers rising above the foliage. Firedale is the best-known variety, producing vivid crimson-red spikes that are among the most intensely colored things in a late summer garden. They catch light beautifully in early morning and late afternoon, glowing almost red-orange when backlit. Album is the white form, elegant, slightly cooler in feeling, excellent for evening gardens or light-colored combinations. J.S. Kalian is a deeper, more saturated burgundy. The plant itself is substantial, 3 to 4 feet tall at maturity, potentially wider. It needs space. Don't squeeze it into a tight border and expect it to behave. Give it room to spread and fill, and it will reward you with something that dominates the late summer and fall garden in the best possible way. One of its most valuable qualities is shade tolerance. Most long-blooming perennials require full sun to perform. Persicaria amplixicalis will bloom prolifically in full sun, but also performs very well in part shade, which means it can fill positions that most sun-loving perennials simply cannot occupy. The north side of a border, the edge of a woodland, under a high canopy tree that casts dappled shade. These are positions where long-season color is particularly hard to find, and Persicaria fills them without compromise. Deer-resistant. Rabbits will occasionally sample the young growth in early spring, but generally move on to more palatable options once the plants are established. Groundhogs are the bigger threat here. They will eat Persicaria if they find it, which is worth knowing if groundhog pressure is a real problem in your garden. A temporary fence around new plants until they are established is the practical solution. Hardy in zones 4 through 8. Low maintenance. Divide every 4 to 5 years to maintain vigor. Find it through specialty perennial nurseries. It's worth the search. 5. Salvia nemorosa. Salvia nemorosa is not a rare plant. You've seen it. Your neighbor probably grows it. It may already be in your garden. But I'd be failing you if I left it off this list because it is one of the most reliable long-blooming perennials in existence, and the majority of gardeners who grow it are getting half its potential bloom because they are not cutting it back correctly. Here's the key. Salvia nemorosa blooms once in late spring, typically May through June, with dense upright spikes in deep purple, violet, or blue. If you leave those spent spikes on the plant, it will trickle out a few scattered blooms through summer. That trickle is not what this plant is capable of. Cut the entire plant back by 2/3 after that first bloom flush, not just deadheading the individual spikes, but cutting the whole mass back hard. And within 6 to 8 weeks, you get a full second bloom that is often as impressive as the first. In some climates with a mild September and October, a third partial flush is possible. 2 to 3 strong flushes per season from a single plant. That is the performance most gardeners are leaving behind. Caradonna is the standard for a reason. Deep blue-purple spikes on near-black stems with a clean, architectural, upright habit. It photographs magnificently and works in nearly any design context. East Friesland is slightly more compact with rich violet blue. Maynight produces the deepest, most saturated indigo purple in the group, and was the perennial plant of the year in 1997. An honor that time has completely vindicated. All of them are drought-tolerant once established, deer-resistant, rabbit-resistant, and almost completely ignored by groundhogs. The aromatic foliage is the reason. The same oils that make salvia smell the way it does make it taste and smell wrong to browsing animals. This is one of the few cases where a plant's fragrance does double duty, attracting pollinators and repelling pests at the same time. All of them are also intensely attractive to bumblebees. Full sun is preferred, though light afternoon shade in hot climates can extend the bloom period of each flush. Hardy in zones 4 through 8, some varieties reliably to zone 3 with good drainage. In terms of design, Salvia nemorosa is one of the most versatile perennials available. The vertical form works as punctuation between mounding plants. The purple-blue color pairs with almost everything: gold, orange, pink, white, silver, in a long border. Repeating it at intervals 3 to 5 times creates the rhythm that makes a planting look designed rather than assembled. 6. Coreopsis moonbeam. Coreopsis moonbeam holds a record that almost no other perennial can claim. It has been in continuous commercial production and consistent popularity for over 40 years without being replaced by something better. When a plant stays in the catalog that long, it means it's delivering something reliable enough that gardeners keep choosing it year after year, even as newer introductions compete for their attention. What it delivers is soft, creamy yellow flowers from June through October. Not golden yellow, creamy, pale, almost buttery. The color is warmer than white without being as assertive as the typical yellow of most Coreopsis varieties, and that softness is what makes it blend so effortlessly with everything around it. It doesn't compete, it completes. The foliage is threadleaf, finely divided, almost ferny, and it forms a tidy mound typically 12 to 18 inches tall and a bit wider. The light texture provides contrast to the bolder foliage of plants like Rudbeckia, Salvia, or Hosta. In a mixed border, moonbeam provides the soft middle ground that keeps the composition from reading as too chunky or too stiff. It is notably drought-tolerant and heat-tolerant, which matters in the late summer months when a lot of perennials start to fade. Moonbeam looks as fresh in August as it did in June. Deadhead occasionally to keep the display clean, though the plant will rebloom even without it. Deer-resistant and generally left alone by rabbits. Groundhogs will occasionally nibble at the base, but it's not a preferred target. In a garden with moderate wildlife pressure, moonbeam holds up well on its own. Hardy in zones 4 through 9. Full sun to very light shade. The only real weakness is that it can be short-lived in heavy clay with poor drainage. Amend the soil or plant it somewhere with natural drainage, and it will persist for years. Companion plants. Pair it with purple Salvia nemorosa for a classic color combination that works at the front or middle of any sunny border. Pair it with deep burgundy heuchera for a warm, cool contrast that holds interest from spring through fall. Use it to fill the gaps between bolder textured perennials and watch how it makes the whole planting feel cohesive. 7. Gaillardia. Blanket flower earned its common name from the way large drifts of it cover the ground with a patchwork of bold color: red, orange, yellow, all blazing together in combinations that look almost too vivid to be real. In terms of bloom season, Gaillardia is one of a small handful of perennials that genuinely delivers from June to frost without exceptional effort. The key is deadheading. Gaillardia sets seed readily, and once seed is set, bloom production drops. Keep the spent flowers removed, and the plant responds with continuous new buds throughout the season. This is not the occasional light deadheading that a plant like Scabiosa requires. Gaillardia rewards consistent removal of spent blooms. Make it a habit when you walk through the garden, and it will bloom all summer without interruption. Oranges and lemons is among the most elegant varieties: soft tangerine orange outer petals that fade to creamy yellow toward the tips, with a warm orange center. It's less strident than some of the red-dominant types and photographs beautifully. Arizona sun is more compact, staying at 10 to 12 inches, and produces classic red and yellow flowers reliably from its first year. Goblin is one of the oldest named varieties, still popular because of its reliable compact habit and bicolor blooms in red with yellow tips. Gaillardia wants full sun and excellent drainage above everything else. It evolved on dry prairies and plains where winters are cold and summers are hot. It will not tolerate consistently wet soil, especially in winter. In clay soils, it's often short-lived because of poor winter drainage. Plant it in amended soil or a raised position, and it persists for years. Given those conditions, it handles drought, heat, and wind without flinching. Hardy in zones 3 through 8. Deer-resistant and rabbit-resistant, the somewhat hairy, rough-textured foliage is unappealing to both. Groundhogs will eat Gaillardia given the opportunity, so if groundhogs are a consistent problem in your garden, protect new plantings until they are established and producing the bitter secondary compounds that make mature plants less palatable. Excellent cut flower. The bold colors hold well in arrangements, and the long stems make them easy to work with. Design note: Gaillardia is bold enough to anchor a section of border on its own. A mass of 5 to 7 plants in full bloom in late July or August is a genuine focal point. Use it in drifts rather than singles for maximum impact, and pair it with fine-textured plants like ornamental grasses or Coreopsis to balance the bold flower form. 8. Stokesia leavis. Stokes aster is the plant that garden designers know about and most home gardeners have never encountered. It's a Native American perennial, native to the southeastern United States, that has been in cultivation for over 200 years and still doesn't get the attention it deserves. The flowers are extraordinary. Large, fringed, aster-like blooms in soft lavender blue or white, produced on stems that hold them upright and visible above the basal foliage. The petals are finely cut and layered in a way that creates a richly textured flower face. It looks more intricate up close than it does from a distance, which is a quality that rewards the gardener who takes time to actually look at what's blooming. Bloom time starts in late spring to early summer, typically May or June depending on your climate, and continues into summer, with some varieties pushing into September in warmer climates. It's not the longest bloomer on this list, but in combination with its toughness and adaptability, it earns its place. Variety matters here. Klaus Gelido is one of the finest, producing exceptionally large blue flowers on sturdy stems. Color wheel is a white to lavender form that's slightly unusual and very beautiful. Peachy's pick is compact and dependable at 12 inches. Mel's blue is among the bluest, producing a true blue that is rare in the perennial world. One of Stokesia's most valuable qualities is adaptability. It tolerates part shade, unusual for a plant with this kind of flower size and quality. It tolerates clay soils and even periodically moist conditions better than most perennials. It is genuinely drought tolerant once established. This range of tolerance means it can fill positions in the garden that more demanding plants can't. Hardy in zones 5 through 9. Deer-resistant and rabbit-resistant both tend to leave it alone consistently. Groundhogs avoid it as well in most situations, making it genuinely reliable for high-pressure wildlife gardens. Excellent for cutting, the flowers hold well in water and the fringed form is distinctive in arrangements. 9. Sanguisorba. If I had to pick one plant from this list that represents the direction serious perennial gardening is moving right now, it would be Sanguisorba. It's been a staple of European gardens, particularly in Germany, where new perennial gardening has been pioneered for decades. In the United States, it's just beginning to get the attention it deserves from designers and gardeners who want something beyond the standard summer palette. Sanguisorba, commonly called burnet, produces bottle brush-shaped flower spikes on tall, arching stems. The form is unlike anything else in the perennial world, not a daisy, not a spike, not a plume. A dense, cylindrical cluster of tiny flowers on a stem that rises and arches outward with a grace that is genuinely balletic. In a breeze, these plants move in a way that is almost musical. The flower color range is excellent. Tanna is the most widely grown, compact at 18 to 24 inches, with deep burgundy spikes that begin in midsummer and continue into fall. Pink brushes is taller, reaching 3 to 4 feet, with soft pink spikes that look beautiful in morning light. Kangshan cranberry is a newer introduction with rich cranberry-colored spikes that hold their color well into fall. The foliage is as interesting as the flowers. Deeply divided, compound leaves that have a blue-green cast and a fine texture. The plant looks good from the moment it emerges in spring right through to frost. This is important for a plant that starts blooming in midsummer. The foliage earns the space in the bed before the flowers arrive. Sanguisorba is surprisingly adaptable. It prefers full sun but tolerates part shade. It handles clay better than many perennials. It tolerates both dry spells and periodic moisture. Hardy in zones 3 through 8. Deer-resistant and rabbit-resistant, the foliage has a mild astringent quality that browsing animals find unappealing. Groundhogs largely avoid it as well. For a plant with this level of elegance and rarity, the fact that it also defends itself from the most common garden pests makes it an even more valuable addition. The ecological value is high. The bottlebrush flowers are rich in nectar and attract a wide range of native bees, particularly smaller native bee species that get overlooked in conversations dominated by honeybees and bumblebees. A stand of Sanguisorba in late summer is genuinely alive with insect activity. Find this through specialty perennial nurseries. Once you grow it, you will wonder how you garden without it. 10. Veronicastrum virginicum. There are plants that add color to a garden, and there are plants that add structure. Veronicastrum virginicum, Culver's root, does both, and it does them in a way that very few other perennials can replicate. This is a tall plant, 4 to 6 feet at maturity, sometimes more in rich, moist soil. It produces slender candelabra-style flower spikes in white, pale pink, or soft lavender in midsummer that rise above the foliage and create a vertical presence that is impossible to achieve with shorter plants. In a mixed border, Veronicastrum is what your eye travels up to, the exclamation point at the back of the composition. The bloom lasts 3 to 4 weeks, which isn't the longest on this list. But what happens after bloom is equally valuable. The spent spikes develop into slender seed heads that hold their architectural form through fall and even into winter. The plant's contribution to a border doesn't end when the flowers fade. It provides structure and vertical interest for months beyond its bloom period. In terms of ecological value, Veronicastrum is exceptional. The flowers are rich in nectar and bloom at a time, July and August, when many native bee populations are at their peak. The seed heads provide food for birds in fall, and as a native prairie plant, it supports specialist insect species that evolved alongside it. Fascination is among the best cultivars, mauve-pink spikes that are slightly softer in feeling than the pure white of the species. Album is the classic white form. Lavender Tower produces pale lavender that photographs beautifully in low light. Hardy in zones 3 through 8. Full sun to part shade. Tolerates consistently moist soil, which is genuinely rare in a plant of this stature. If you have a wet area at the back of a border that you've struggled to fill with something impressive, Veronicastrum is the answer. Deer and rabbits avoid it reliably. Groundhogs rarely touch it. There's something about the somewhat bitter foliage and upright architectural form that wildlife tends to pass over in favor of more obvious targets. In a mixed border, Veronicastrum tends to be the last plant standing after a nighttime deer browse. 11. Helenium. Most gardeners are finishing their season in August. Their plants have peaked. The deadheading is losing the battle. The garden looks tired. Helenium is the plant that makes your garden look better in September than any of your neighbor's gardens did in June. Helenium, commonly called sneezeweed, a name that refers to its historical use, not to any allergenic quality, blooms from late summer to frost. In zones 5 through 7, expect blooms from August through October. In warmer climates, September through November. When most perennials are winding down, Helenium is hitting its stride. The flowers are daisy-form with reflexed petals that curve backward from the prominent central cone, giving the flower a distinctive swept-back appearance that is immediately recognizable. The color range is among the warmest and richest in the perennial world. Deep mahogany, russet red, burnt orange, golden yellow, by colors and gradients between all of these. These are autumn colors in the literal sense, the colors of changing foliage, of harvest, of the turning season. Mardi Gras is one of the most beautiful warm orange shading to yellow toward the petal tips, with a rich orange-brown center. Moerheim Beauty is the classic dark variety, producing deep copper-red flowers that are stunning against late-season grasses and asters. Baudierter Lynn is a compact selection at 24 inches that works well in smaller borders. Waltraut produces warm amber orange that seems to glow in afternoon light. Deer-resistant, the foliage of Helenium is mildly toxic and bitter, which is why it was historically used as a medicinal herb and why deer consistently avoid it. Rabbits avoid it for the same reason. Groundhogs are more variable. They will sometimes sample it, especially in spring, but mature established plants are typically left alone. The toxicity of the foliage that makes it unappealing to browsers is also what gives it a slight advantage over some of the more palatable plants on this list. All Helenium wants is full sun and consistent moisture. Unlike most of the other plants on this list, it is not particularly drought-tolerant. It wants water, especially during the dry stretches of late summer. In a border with drip irrigation or in a naturally moist site, it performs magnificently. In a dry, neglected bed, it will struggle. Hardy in zones 3 through 8. Excellent for cutting, the rich warm tones work beautifully in autumn arrangements. Divide every 3 to 4 years to maintain vigor and bloom quality. The ecological value in fall is extraordinary. When most flowers are gone, Helenium provides critical nectar for migrating monarch butterflies, bumblebee queens building fat reserves for winter, and specialist native bee species that time their flight to late-season blooms. Planting it is not just aesthetically rewarding. It's genuinely useful to the ecosystem you're part of. 12. Kalimeris incisa. I have saved the rarest plant for last. Kalimeris incisa is almost completely unknown in American gardening. You will not find it at a garden center. You will not see it at most specialty nurseries. You have to seek it out, and when you find it, you need to buy every one they have, because once it's in your garden, you will want more of it. Kalimeris incisa, sometimes called Japanese aster or false aster, produces small daisy flowers, white or soft lavender, about an inch across from early summer continuously to frost. Not flush and fade, not bloom and dressed, continuous. The flowers open, they set no seed because the plant puts no energy into seed production and immediately new buds form. This cycle repeats without interruption from June to October or November, and it does all of this without deadheading, without cutting back, without any management at all. The plant is, as close as any perennial I know, self-cleaning and self-sufficient. The individual flowers are small and daisy-like, not dramatic in the way that Helenium or Gaillardia is dramatic, but the effect of a plant absolutely covered in dozens of small blooms for 5 months straight is its own kind of drama. In a border, it functions as the steadiest background presence, always blooming, always fresh, always providing context for the showier plants around it. The plant form is rounded and mounding, typically 18 to 24 inches tall and slightly wider. It's particularly valuable as a filler, placed between larger structural plants to connect them, provide continuity, and ensure that there is always something happening in that spot regardless of what month it is. It tolerates part shade better than most long-blooming perennials, which extends its usefulness significantly. It handles a range of soil conditions without complaint. It is not particular about drainage in the way that some of the Mediterranean origin plants on this list are, deer-resistant and rabbit-resistant. Groundhogs tend to leave it alone as well. The fine-textured foliage and small flower size don't seem to register as particularly appetizing to browsing animals. In a high-pressure wildlife garden, Kalimeris is one of the safest bets on this list. Hardy in zones 4 through 9. Find it through specialty perennial mail-order nurseries. Once you grow it, you will understand immediately why it belongs in every serious perennial garden. And you will wonder, as every gardener who discovers it wonders, why it took this long to find it. 12 plants. One idea running through all of them. Most perennial gardens are designed around peak season, around the flowers that bloom hardest in June and July. The plants on this list were chosen for what they do after peak season. They are the reason a garden still looks alive in September. They are the reason your garden looks better in October than your neighbor's did in May. None of these are difficult. None of them require exceptional soil or elaborate care routines. What they require is a little patience, because most of them get better every year as they establish, and some of them, like Persicaria and Sanguisorba, don't fully reveal what they are capable of until year 2 or 3. That patience is paid back in months of color instead of weeks, in a garden that carries through to frost instead of giving up at midsummer. The other thing they have in common is that they're better for wildlife than the standard summer perennial palette. Late-blooming plants feed pollinators when almost nothing else is available. Monarch butterflies migrating south in September need nectar. Bumblebee queens building fat reserves for winter need nectar. Native bee species whose flight periods are timed to late summer and fall need nectar. A garden with Helenium, Kalimeris, Persicaria, and Sanguisorba still blooming in October is providing something that a garden of spent dailies and finished coneflowers simply cannot. Plant any 3 of these this spring. Come back in fall and tell me whether your garden looked the same as every other garden on the street, or whether it was still worth looking at when the rest of the neighborhood had given up. Drop a comment and tell me which one you're starting with. I read everyone. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button now. New video every week, and the next one is worth seeing. I'll see you there.